Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Improving Edge Conference. We are glad to have you here with us today. Before I introduce our brilliant presenter, I wanted to ensure you, our wonderful audience, is aware of the Q&A feature included in this webinar. If you have any questions for the presenter, feel free to share it in the Q&A feature, which is located at the bottom of the window. It is an absolute honor to introduce our presenter today, Jay Steinfeld. Jay has accomplished many great things, including speaking a few months ago at our Atlanta office with a terrific response. He founded and was the CEO of Blinds.com, the world's #1 online windows covering retailer. Blinds.com was acquired by the Home Depot in 2014, and eventually in 2020, Jay stepped away from this role to give back, teaching at Rice University, Jones Graduate School for Business, and serving on 5 boards. Jay is also the author of the book, Lead from the Core, the 4 Principles for Profit Prosperity, which is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. He will make some opening remarks, then we'll have time to take your questions. So I introduce to you, Jay Steinfeld. Take it away, Jay.
Jordan, thank you. And thanks everybody for attending today. It's a pleasure to be here. Improving is a company that I know a lot about. We used Improving at Blinds.com, and I don't know if they're still using them. I'm not there anymore. But we had a great relationship with Improving, and it's great to give back also to Improving and to you. Well, the question I'm asked more than anything is, how did you, with so few people and so little money, disrupt the entire window covering industry and disrupt Amazon and Home Depot, and then Home Depot ends up buying you? Well, what's more important is not so much what I did, but how did the things that I do apply potentially to improving, to make improving better? How can it apply to your role to help your own clients at improving? And the bonus is, how can what I did apply to your career, to your life, to make your life even better than what you even believed was possible? Because that's what happened to me. So in like 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to try to improve your life, improve your client's life, and improve improving. So that's a big feat, but we'll see what we can do. You know, when I started, I really didn't know anything about the things I'm about to tell you. In 1993, I went online, and all I had was this idea that I could potentially attract a different type of customer that I had in my store with my wife, Naomi, which we started in 1987, a retail store in Houston, Texas. Well, I heard about something called the information superhighway, the internet, and thought I would just experiment and try a little, see if I could just get people to buy online. Well, over time, it grew and grew. And in 2001, I decided to sell my store and go full-time online. Problem is, the next year, my wife, Naomi, who had been diagnosed with cancer 5 years ago from then, passed away. And then I was faced with a dilemma of, should I continue building this business? How would I even potentially be happy again? How could I define my success? So I needed to figure out how I could be happy again, because I was in bad shape. And this is how I became introspective about myself and about what makes me tick. And then I applied these things to the business. These authentic 4 things, the 4 principles of profit and prosperity, that was the key for us changing everything and changing my own life and becoming #1 in the world. The first one, and they're called the 4 E's because they all start with the letter E. The first E is evolve, evolve continuously. Now, you know what that means. It means to adapt, but it's not just about you adapting. It's about you adapting and improving and evolving everything around you. You had not only a responsibility to get better yourself, but you had a responsibility that if you saw something else, someone else, that you had the responsibility to help that person. And when you've got an organization where everybody in the organization is not only getting better, but helping everybody else get better, then you can step back and just watch this autonomous excellence happen. And as a leader, it is so much easier when people are automatically improving. Okay, so you're improving yourself, you're improving the business, you're improving all your stakeholders. How do you make it easier for improving to do their work at blinds.com? By providing better use cases, better information, clarity of vision, clarity of objectives to make it easier. The idea is just to improve everything around you. Second is, in order to get better, you have to take some chances. And experiment without fear of failure was number 2. So you know that if you're not failing, then you're really not experimenting, because 70, 80% of the time with anything you try is not going to work. We had 2 big test tubes. They were 5 foot tall, about 1.5 feet wide. In one test tube, we had marbles of all the experiments that were not working. That test tube was full. In the other test tube, we had the experiments that worked. It was only about 20% full, because we wanted to show people that when we were going to experiment furiously, lots of experiments, that most of the time it wasn't going to work. And what that does is it creates not only improvement, but through the experimentation itself, but it provides a resilience within the organization, a clarity of, we are going to get better, and most of the time we will fail, and that's okay. And you get used to that. So it becomes just a matter of fact, muscle memory, that it didn't work, let's try something else. Well, that didn't work, let's try something else. That worked, let's do it again and double down. So when you have an organization that's getting better and experimenting, well, it's hardly a business that is not going to get really good as it compounds over time. The third thing is, if you're going to get better and you're going to experiment, you need data for those experiments. You need people to speak up. So the third E is to express yourself. We wanted people to say, truly, candidly, honestly, Jay, that idea you have, could we try it a different way? Because you can't know everything there is to know in order to get good enough. That can only come from the people who are doing the work. So when people are not afraid to speak up, when they feel safe that they can speak up and say what they believe will help the business, help themselves, help me, that's a place where people want to be. Our turnover was only 8%. Because why would somebody leave when they're getting better, when they're not stagnant, when they have a voice, when they can say what they really want to say, respectfully, of course, but honestly. And then the fourth E, enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. Yes, we had foosball and shuffleboard and ping pong and free food, but enjoying the ride for us was doing the first 3, was evolving and experimenting and expressing ourselves and doing things that people said could never be done. That's really fun, because when you accomplish something, you can go back home and say, well, what'd you do today? You say, we did something that nobody thought we could ever do. We've actually changed the entire window covering industry. We're beating Amazon. We got additional market share. We are now beating Home Depot. Or once we became part of Home Depot, the technology that we built was integrated into the entire Home Depot ecosystem, into 2,200 stores online. That's a pretty cool thing to do when your work is actually being noticed and it's being used by millions of people. That's how we were able to do it, by attracting people who wanted to be in an environment where they could always get better, where they had a voice, where they had fun, where they were able to become better than they ever believed possible. In fact, that was our purpose. Our stated purpose was to help people become better than they ever believed possible. That's how we did it. Now, part of that you'd say as well, you sound benevolent, empathetic. No, it's really just logic. If you want to get better, you need the best team possible. And you need to provide a fertile ground, an environment that makes people safe and feel energized to do the best they can. And they'll do way more than you even ask them to do. I mean, you don't really want people to do everything you say, because you don't know everything they should do. They do. So let them do that. It's just a remarkable environment to be in when people are improving themselves and you and the organization without a whole lot of direction from you. So it's really about bringing respect to people, humanity back into the workplace, or generosity. And generosity doesn't have to necessarily be about money. Yes, you have to pay people fairly. Of course you do. They have to be paid what they're worth, maybe a little more. But generosity is more about providing attention to people, not only providing them with clarity of what your vision is, but asking them, what is your vision for your life? Where do you want to go? What can I do as the CEO to provide support to you so that I know where you're going, we know where you're going, whether it's within the company or out. There are so many examples of people who started at blinds.com and said they were only going to be there for a couple of years and stayed for 10, 15 years. Even though they wanted to go elsewhere, eventually, they became better by being part of the organization. Generosity means providing not only clarity of their vision and understanding that, but providing the resources and the personal development tools that they can use to get better, to achieve their own goals. It means when they say, I've got an idea, you don't say, well, send it to me in writing. You say, oh, great, I'll come over to your office and you can tell me all about it. So it's asking what other people want and listening and then doing something about it. I think if you think of business as the place where you do as little as possible and see if you can get away with it, it can be turned around where you can say, no, business is what is the most that I can do for my customers, for everybody around, where it's in the long-term best interest of the business. That's how you develop a business that's outstanding. So before I finish, I just want to let you know what my definition of success is. My definition of success is not about achieving something, about having 100 million or $1 billion in sales, about selling my company to Home Depot. Yes, those are milestones that I'm very proud of. But the definition of success, for me at least, is about being in the process of getting better. So that every day, if I get just a little bit better, I'm successful. If I can help somebody else get just a little bit better, that's success. When you have that type of philosophy about what success is, you can be successful every day. In fact, you can be successful multiple times during the day. And when you find out something that about yourself or about the organization that you don't like, that you think is a shortcoming, instead of going, oh man, I'm going to whine about this, I'm not that good at this, it's, no, I am happy that I found something else that I can get better at. Because the more things you get better at and the faster you get better, everything else compounds so that you can then be successful. So I'm going to hope that after these last 15 minutes and the Q&A, that somehow one of you or several of you will get just a little bit better. And if that happens, then I will be successful. So thank you, Jordan and Christina, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jay. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, if anyone has any Q&A, please feel free to send it out to us. We did get a couple questions though. Could you speak a bit about generosity? How does generosity play a part of leadership?
Well, I think that question is, I just talked about that a couple minutes ago about the generosity. I think that most people do believe that they need to be stingy and they need to cut costs And if they don't think about it in terms of money, and they think about it in terms of attention and personal development and resources and really being respectful and humanity back to people, that's the kind of generosity that a good leader can have.
Awesome. Thank you. Could you also talk about how did a tiny company like blinds.com disrupt Amazon and the big boxes?
Well, it was the four E's that evolve, experiment, express, and enjoy that attracted the right people. And having the right people with the right long-term vision of being not just the best in the world at selling blinds, but the best at selling complex, customizable products. And by having the right people who saw that vision and thought it was tantalizing, we were able to keep and attract people for not as much money as they might have been able to get at some of the big oil companies around town. But they liked the opportunity to do something consequential, because the only way you can do something consequential is by making people consequential. And that's what we did.
Thank you. What about, was your goal always to sell global custom commerce, or was that an opportunistic moment for you and your senior leadership?
So when I went into business, did I think about selling the company? Well, that was almost 30 years ago. So I don't think when I first went into business, I thought about selling it at all. It was not something that I did other than just experiment, and which was one of my E's. And it was just to sell more blinds. That was really all it was. And when I never took institutional capital for almost 15 years. Once I took institutional capital from a PE firm, Morgan Stanley Growth Capital out of California, then I knew within 5 years, likely we would probably sell or be looking to sell. As it turns out, 2 years later, after we took that growth capital, we did sell. But the goal was not to sell at the beginning. The goal was to sell blinds and to make money and pocket make distributions. The problem what we had was that some of the original investors, that's all they wanted. They just wanted cash. And I wanted to grow. And as a result, that money that we took from the institutional investor from Morgan Stanley was used to buy them out. And that was a great deal. We bought them out at a low multiple and took in the cash at a high multiple. So actually taking in the investment capital was accretive. It was not dilutive. I actually ended up owning more money, owning more stock after taking in the investment capital. There's a great story about that in my book, Lead from the Core. It's pretty funny it was interesting and a little hairy, but it all worked out very well.
That sounds really interesting. We have another one come in. How did you help your team to keep aligned with these 4 core values?
Well, the best way to be aligned with any culture is to actually do it. You can talk about it, and we talked about it all the time. We gave awards about them. They're still giving awards, the Evolve Continuously Award, the Experiment Without Fear Award, things like that. But the only way it's really going to happen is if you, as the leader, the CEO, actually behave. Because a culture is not about what you say, it's about what you do. In fact, it's really only what you do. You say it just to remind people of what you're doing and that is the expected behavior. Because if you're not evolving, you're probably going to not be able to keep up, and you're not going to have a role. If you're not experimenting, if you're not speaking up, it's not going to be fun. The people who don't evolve and experiment and evolve and express themselves are not going to have fun. And it takes a certain type of person to be there. So whatever your core values are, make sure you hire for that. For instance, when we had looked for people to be entrepreneurial and to see if they would experiment, we would ask them questions in the interview, such as, give me some examples of how you're experimenting right now in your life to improve in any way. And if they said, well, I'm taking a cooking class, or I'm learning to fly, or to be more patient, stop smoking, I'm exercising, those are the kinds of things we wanted, because it was hard to teach everybody to improve and to feel comfortable with that. We wanted people who already not only had a propensity to improve, but had the behavior to do so, so that it was just natural for them to continue to live these 4 core values. And if you're not living them, if you're not showing them, if you're not talking about them and rewarding people for that, it's not going to happen. So the best way to make sure it's happening is to just do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question that came in. What was the biggest obstacle you overcame in surmounting your grief when your employees are aware of their role in helping you alleviate that grief? Excuse me, sorry.
Okay. Would you repeat that? What I heard was,
Yeah.
How did I overcome my grief, or how did I would you mind answering?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. The question was, what was the biggest obstacle what was the biggest obstacle overcoming your, I'm sorry, one more time. What was the biggest obstacle you overcame in surmounting your grief when your employees are aware of their role in helping you alleviate that grief?
So how it is, I think the essence of the question is, when I was grieving the loss of my wife, how did I overcome that? Is that essentially it? And then what did my employees' role have in that?
Right, I think
I'm not sure my employees had a role in that, but what I do think is that what I had to do was to accept the grief. The paradox, what I learned is, and this is true with so many things in life, that it's not binary. That the goal is not to try to not be sad anymore. I'm still sad. It was 22 years ago, and I'm still sad. I should be sad. My wife died. I'd been married for 25 years. So what I did was realize that to try to mitigate the sadness was not the thing to do. The sadness is a sign, even today, that I had a great marriage. And also relish in life, relish in the successes that I've had, relish in all the joy that I've had with my children and all the success that I've had with the business and with the people who have grown. Both can coexist. And that's what I did, was able to realize, and this is what I tell people who say, my father just died, my wife just died, or something. What should I do? I said, don't do anything. Just accept it. Accept the grief, but also relish in the joy of life. If you can do both of those things together, you'll be much happier.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We did have another question come through. What is
Did you say from Peru?
Oh, sorry. No, I said through. We have another question that came through.
Okay.
Yes. What was your biggest motivator?
Oh, wow. Well, I can answer that on several different levels. I'm going to go right down to the core on this one. Lead from the core, right? My biggest motivator is death. Probably wasn't gonna think I was going to say that one, but yeah, my wife died when she was 46. My mother died when she was 46, both of cancer. So I developed a sensitivity to time, the fragility of time. And I don't know when I'm going to die. I'm healthy and I believe I'm going to live a long time, but I don't know. And I'm going to see what I can do now, today. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to see how good I can become and what I can do and what else I can learn and how many other people I can affect, what significance I can have in the world. And I'm not going to sit around and wait and complain about things. I'm just going to do it. And that's really what one of my biggest motivator is. Not the fear of death, but necessarily, but the understanding of death. And as a result, I work hard and I don't settle. I don't want to be stagnant. I want to have the fun of exploring and seeing what I can become.
Thank you. That was awesome. Let me see. We did have another one come through. One of your biggest themes is to bring humanity back to business. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. I'm on a lot of boards. Over the last few years, I've been on 7. And I'm in these meetings, especially with outside investors, venture capital, private equity, and just investors in general. And they're always talking about numbers. Home Depot talked about numbers, but they weren't talking about people. They weren't talking about respect for people. It was respect for spreadsheets. And I think what I'm talking about is, let's think truly about our people first. And when you take care of your people, everything else takes care of itself. This is something that you hear about, but it's true. All these things that we're talking about, by being generous to people and just having respect, the personal development, the generosity, that's what I mean, is being respectful to people, is having some humanity with people too much to ask in business? I think when you do that, you will make way more money and it'll certainly be more fun. It'll be less stressful because everybody is going to be helping everyone else. And that's just a collaborative spirit. It's a collaborative way to learn more. And that also gets into the great resignation and why people are leaving. Well, if there's no connection, if there's no greater purpose, if people are just there for the money and there's no connection with the other people who are there, no common bond, well, of course they're going to leave. They're going to be looking for some higher purpose themselves. So the idea is for you to have that higher purpose, and you will find that your turnover will be much lower. People won't even be thinking about leaving, unless, of course, they just offer double the money. You can't do anything about that. But that doesn't normally happen. You can control your turnover. You can control people leaving, this exodus, by being more respectful, for having more care and sympathy for people, for what matters to them. And then they will be more attentive to what matters to the business. You can't expect people to be attentive to your customers if you're not attentive to them first. It's about behavior. We mentioned that a little while ago. How you behave and what you say is important is what people will do, because they know they will be not only motivated by it, but they will have more opportunities. They will become supervisors faster and be able to have more authority when they demonstrate the core values of the business.
Thank you. That was great. I would like to add on to that a little bit. Actually, is I think we see that a lot with ethical, business practices. You know, if you're going to work with someone, you want to see that honesty, that relationship, and that truthfulness. You know, you have a choice to work with someone maybe for a little bit more money, or someone that's more honest, and that you have those connections. You might lean a little bit more towards, the honesty and
yeah, I mean, honesty for sure. But what people are afraid of doing is being honest because they feel that it might hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
But you're actually hurting their feelings by not being honest, because I mean, that's disrespectful. Not
Right.
telling somebody the truth is disrespectful And it's not helpful at all, because one day you're going to say, that's just not working out. Well, it's not working out because you didn't tell that person what would have worked out, and you didn't even give them the opportunity. I mean, that's all on you. That's not on them. You had an opportunity to help somebody to get better, and you blew it. And you blew an opportunity for the organization to get better because you weren't candid. When you're not candid with somebody, you're actually lying to them. That is not a good behavior. That doesn't look good on people.
Right. Thank you. And we have another question that came through. What did you do to maximize the company to be sold?
Whoa. Grew 25% a year. That was with a lot of profit and expanded gross margin. I mean, those are the basics. But some of the things we actually did besides that, I mean, that's big right there, was we got a legitimate outside board that helped us with our direction and our vision and our strategy. So when people saw that we were governed well, they knew that we were serious about the business, and it created not only a better business, but a halo effect. We hired Ernst & Young as our auditors. We hired Silicon Valley Bank as our bank. We had real board meetings with proper governance. We had audited financial statements. So when people came looking at us, and we didn't even hire an investment banker. We never hired a banker to sell. Companies just came our way because we were pesky. we were one of those upstart renegade companies that the big companies just said, "Oh, there they are again." And when they looked at it, they felt we had a clean balance sheet. We ran the company well. We were growing. They felt there were no skeletons in the closet. We were able to get the information to them quickly, and it looked like we were positioned to go public because of all the different things that we were doing that a company going public would have done. And we might have done that, but the fact is now that when a strategic went to look to buy us, they were now competing not just with another strategic, but with the public market. And they had to then say, well, if Blinds.com went public, how much could they probably get in the public market? So they had to then create an additional competitor, and not just Home Depot thinking about Lowe's or Amazon or one of the other big companies who might have been a good strategic buyer, but they thought about the public. So that's what we did. We grew. We made sure we had a minimum amount of a minimum threshold of profit, and kept our growth rate really high. And we showed that we could actually regulate growth and profit. By decreasing our growth rate, we could increase profit. So a potential buyer could come in and make the decision: do we want to continue growing at 25%, or do we want more profit? And they could then figure out what they wanted. But the fact that we could grow fast was great, or we could make a lot of money. And so we kept it right in the middle to give the potential buyers the opportunity, and that appealed to them. That way they could model it different ways and see which way made sense to them.
That was awesome. Again, thank you. We did have another question come through. Given your relatively radical, people-focused approach.
Whoa, hold on. Radical? Radical people? That's the thing that kind of bothers me. Not the question itself, but how is this radical? Isn't this, again, just decency? It shouldn't be radical. It shouldn't be this anomalous. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. How did you select your outside board members?
Outside board members. All right. So we had the former CMO of Staples. That was through a relationship of my attorney, who thought, well, we're a marketing company. Blinds.com is really a direct marketing company. a technology company, not a blinds retailer. And we thought the person who was in charge of Staples marketing would be a good candidate, and turned out he was great. Then Morgan Stanley had a lot of people they were suggesting as another outside board member. We were very careful about taking on that next board member. And this person was really good at distribution and sourcing. And we were looking at how we could decrease our increase gross margin, decrease cost of goods. And sourcing was a topic that we were very weak at, and felt that bringing on this other person would do that. And it was only about 4 or 5 months later, after the second person arrived, that we got our offer from Home Depot. So we never did what we were going to do, but he was there to do it. And that's how we found him, through Morgan Stanley, through our own sources, our own relationships. And we hired them, we selected them based on what the business needed at the time. We needed marketing expertise, and we needed sourcing, distribution expertise, and licensing. We were looking at licensing. The second person had that expertise as well. So it wasn't just a marquee name or somebody who's a good business person. We had particular needs. I think if you're looking for board members, you need to look at the gaps in your own organization. What do you aspire to be? Who do you really want to? What do you need? What do you not have? What expertise do you need? And look specifically for that expertise.
Awesome. Another question that came through, did Agile software development methodologies have any influence in creating your core values?
Yes. Well, the whole company is Agile. I was Agile before I knew what Agile was. My whole thinking is Agile development. It wasn't until the IT department, Larry Heck, Tom Kabansky, Wade Pinder, told me, hey, you're doing Agile development. And in everything, in the way we experiment, in the way we think about use cases, in how we ranked those use cases. So yes, Agile development was not just a software development tool. It was how we thought about our entire business. It applied to everything. Everything was Agile development. And even my life is that way. It still is. Even though I'm not with blinds.com anymore, I'm still evolving. I'm still experimenting. I'm still trying new things. When I went to teach, when I went on these boards, I'm on a public board now. I'm on a SaaS board. I'm on a health company board. Things I've never done. I'm stretching. I want to learn. I don't want to be stagnant, and I want to be able to give back. So I think that's the key.
Awesome. We have another question that came through. What would you do differently if you were to start your venture or your company this year? Will you be applying the same 4E concepts or add anything else?
I've thought about that, because the core values themselves even evolved over time. When we started, well, we had none. Then we had 3. Then I realized 1 didn't make any sense, moved it to 2. And then there's a whole story. We went up to 5, down to 4. The names have changed. It's all evolved. But when I wrote the book, Lead from the Core, I had a lot of time to think about that. And those are my 4 core values. Those are my 4 core values. And that means that's when I wake up in the morning, this is what I do. I evolve, I express myself, I experiment, and I try to have fun. So I don't know why that would be any different in any business or anything that I do, period. Now, if there's anything I would do differently, well, it wouldn't be the difference of my core values, but I'd probably go a lot faster because I'd have to. One of the luxuries I had, kind of luck, if you will, was at the time in 1993, nobody even knew what email was. There was no broadband. And 2001 was pretty early. So I had the luxury of being able to go slowly. And even though I was rapidly experimenting, it was still fairly slow relative to the pace that you need to do this today. So if there's anything I would do differently, I would go much faster, because you have to go faster. Back then I could be stealth.
Awesome. Another great answer. Thank you. Another question that came in. Have any of the other companies that you have worked with adopted any of the core values for themselves?
Well, I tried to join companies that already have that, either part of their DNA or at least the experimentation and the evolving. And it'd be hard for me to join a company that was stationary. Even the public company that I joined, Masonite, they asked me to join because they're of their own evolution of moving from a door manufacturer into a product solution provider, which happens to be doors. And to help them rethink that's why they chose me. And that's fun, because now I've got this mission to try to change the whole company. And that's pretty fun. I have noticed on another company, I'm on the Tovala board, which is a meal kit company out of Chicago. And I hear them talk about furious experimentation all the time. And I love all the experiments they're doing. They have scores of experiments going on with their pricing, with their marketing, with their operations. And I can tell, I know he read my book, the CEO, and because the language that he's using in communicating to his organization is exactly the language that I used. And he was always an experimenter, but now he's got this structure to it that makes it much faster and much clearer for everyone else. And the company's doing awesome. Tovala is a great company. I'm sure others are as well, but I don't want to bore you with all these different companies. But yes, they are using them.
Great. One other question that came through. What was it like going from owning your own business to being part of Home Depot, one of the biggest companies in the world?
That's a good question. We'll read the book. There's a lot in it on that. Of course, it changed. It definitely changed. The core values remain the same, and they still remain today. Now, 8 years later, 9 years later, Home Depot was smart enough to say, we're a giant company. At the time, they were doing 79 billion. Now I think it's 145 billion. Half a million people, 2,400 stores. It's a big company. Your life is going to change. You don't have the keys to the car anymore. You have to ask permission to drive the car. You have to get permission pretty much to do everything. But they were smart enough to say, we have a habit of crushing little companies when we buy them. So please speak up. Speak up. Well, I can do that. If we ever do anything that could unintentionally crush you. So there were a lot of occasions, and it was pretty fun because that's a core value. We want to experiment. We want to speak up. And lo and behold, here I am on a big stage where I can speak up directly to everybody, to the CEO, the CFO, the whole C-suite, even Bernie Marcus, one of the original founders. I had a meeting with him to ask him for advice. So it changed in that I felt like we were Tony Stark and Home Depot was Jarvis in the suit, and together we were Iron Man. So we were doing all sorts of stuff that neither one of us could have done independently. And yes, it was frustrating. There was a lot of time for getting capital, the whole capital allocation process, and when a big company, budgetary, hitting numbers. Yeah, you had to hit numbers. And that was a little frustrating. We were used to growing and being less sensitive to the bottom line. With Home Depot, every number counted. There was somebody assigned to every line item on your income statement, pretty much. So you had to make sure that every line item was optimized, which was a little frustrating because we knew we could have grown faster and achieved higher market share even faster if we could have diminished the profit a little bit as we did before we sold. But things like that, I mean, that was fine. We were able to now sell products that we never were able to sell before, like custom decks, countertops, custom vanities, custom sheds, all sorts of products that we always had envisioned to do, but never could do except by virtue of we were now Iron Man and we were now Home Depot. And seeing everything integrated into those 2,400 stores throughout North America, that was pretty exciting. And that's why I stayed. I mean, how many people sell their company, don't need the money anymore, but stay on for 7 years? Well, that's what I did. It wasn't until 2020 that I left, because we were achieving that big vision, and Home Depot was allowing us to do it. And despite the frustration, even 3 years after we sold, almost everybody was still there. When does that happen? Well, it's because they allowed us to keep our core values. Now, there's some people from the HR department from time to time who would say, no, your core values, you don't have 4 core values. Home Depot has 8. You now have 8 core values. And we don't know, those are not our core values. Those are Home Depot's. We respect those core values. So then we had to come up with all this stuff on how we could respect the 8 core values of Home Depot, but know that the behaviors of blinds.com are our 4, and those are our 4. So we created an image of our 4 core values right in the middle, and then the value wheel of Home Depot of their 8 around ours. So we acknowledged all 12, but knew that at the core of our behavior were our own 4 core values, and that was not going to change. And before I left, I made sure one of the conditions before I left the company was I wanted to make sure that our core values really were embedded in everybody or close to everybody. And once I saw that was there, it made it much easier to leave.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you. Another question that came in, what are some ways you have come up with ideas and experiments?
But most of the best ideas came from other people. The best way is to just ask and say, what are the problems you're facing? And let us just come up with any crazy idea you've got. And then we'll look at how much does it cost? How complex is it? How much time will it take versus what's the upside benefit? And you just do a 2x2 matrix, and you do the easiest things that you can test really fast, or the things that don't take a lot of time to test. And even if you think it has minimal upside potential, if you do a lot of those, eventually they compound and you get a lot of potential out of it. Now, the things that you would also rank higher if it was existential and you felt like, well, if we don't do this, we're going to really be in trouble. We could be out of business. So you work on those first. There aren't too many things like that. But basically, you ask other people for ideas and you just say, what do you think might work? Let's put it on a list. Let's put our heads together, and then we'll prioritize based on complexity, cost, time, and upside benefit.
Great, thank you. One more question came through. If the culture didn't change after you merged with Home Depot, how do you do that, and what advice do you have for others that sell?
That's a really good question. I think the best thing to do is to think of it like, I don't know if you've heard of The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It's basically where everybody has their own definition, not everybody, but there's about 5 different types of love languages. And your love language may be different than your significant other's love language. And the idea is to not expect that other person to have your love language, but to acknowledge that it's different than yours. Well, that's what we did at Home Depot. Our love language, so to speak, is basically one of 3. You can either be organizationally efficient. Well, that was Home Depot's. You can be customer intimate. That was us. Or the third one is you could be a product leader. That'd be Apple. So our love language was customer intimacy and people intimacy. Home Depot's was organizational efficiency. And the idea was to not say that one should be different or should be like the other as their prime driver, but to just accept each other's love language. And that's what we were able to do. And we learned how to be more operationally efficient, even though our primary driver was about customer intimacy. And Home Depot, we think, in some way, little way, became more customer intimate as they took our technology and our way of thinking, and even the way we paid our people in our contact center, what we call the customer engagement center, and how we paid our variable compensation plan. They took some of that into their organization. I shouldn't say our organization. And the ability to help each other do those things was the way we were able to cope. It still was frustrating many times. Almost every day there was something that would frustrate one or the other. But by not expecting the other to really be like us, but having some influence to learn how we can be better by their superpower, that's how we did it.
Great, Jay. Thank you so much. That is all of the questions I see in our Q&A section and our chat section as well. Thank you, Jay, for sharing with us today. That was a wonderful talk. The recording of the session will be available next week on Improving's YouTube channel, along with our other virtual events. This is only the first talk of this year's Improving Edge conference, and we have 2 more events today and more sessions every other day this week. So I encourage you, please check out each session. You can register for Improving Edge events at theimprovingedge.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.